Started. Let's get it going. Good evening. Today is Wednesday, May 12th, 2021, and it's 7 o'clock, and it's the Committee on Infrastructure. As chairman of the Committee on Infrastructure, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that we are providing public access to the meeting by telephone with additional access possibilities by video and other electronic means. To access Zoom, please refer to the agenda or city's website for the meeting link. To join by phone, dial 1-929-205-6099, meeting ID 872-9269-6604 with a passcode of 776033. The public may also view the meeting via Channel 16. We previously gave notice to the public of the necessary information for assessing the meeting through the public postings. Instructions have also been provided on the City of Nashva's website at www.nationalnewhampshire.gov and publicly noticed in City Hall and Nashua Public Library. If anyone has a problem accessing the meeting via phone or Channel 16, please call 603-821-2049 and they will help you connect. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting via the methods mentioned above, the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. So let's start the meeting by taking a roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during the meeting, which is required under the right to know law. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alderman at Large, Michael B. O'Brien, Sr.
I am present. I can hear the proceedings and I am alone.
Alderman Thomas Lopez.
I'm present. I can hear the meeting and I am alone.
Thank you. Alderman Jan Schmidt is here and I'm alone in the room and I can hear everyone. Alderman Ernest Jetty.
I'm here alone and I can hear the proceedings.
And Alderman David C. Tenza.
Alderman Tenza did notify me. He is intending to join us, but he will be late for the meeting. He has another commitment. Therefore, I do declare we have a quorum with 4 members present. Right to the clerk?
Correct, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Also,
Point of order.
will be Tim Cummings, Economic Development Director. Yes.
Mr. Chair, I have a point of order.
Yes.
Have we double checked with legal that the executive orders governing meetings are still in effect? Because at the beginning of all our meetings, we quote them a lot. And I thought he ended a bunch of them.
Not this one.
No.
Okay. As long as he left this one here, that's the only one I care about.
Well, I don't know what to say. I have a hard time following the governor myself, so I don't know.
All right. Well, I'll ask Attorney Bolton, I guess. I mentioned it last night, but I didn't realize I never got an answer. So I was like, wait, what are we doing? So, okay.
Well, thank you, Alderman. Yeah, he would be the better person to answer that question, I would say. Yeah. All right. Anything else? Well, also in attendance is Alderman Richard Dowd with us tonight. Okay. At this time, we'll open up the meeting to public comment. I see Mr. Mark McCabe. Do you wish to speak to the board?
If I need to, good evening, Board of Aldermen. Thank you for,
Yeah, it's your choice if you wish, sir.
I'm happy to answer any questions. I know my lovely wife Rita has been in contact with some of you already previously regarding our request. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to help. She's actually, we're at our store up on Amherst Street right now, our Sub-Zero Nitrogen ice cream store. And she's doing a science presentation for a bunch of Girl Scouts. So she'll jump in here as soon as she can.
Okay. Mr. McCabe, are you capable just to give us a brief overview how this will help your business and why you seek these changes?
Yes, sir. Happy to do that. We are moving our location here from Amherst Street down to the corner of Main and Water, across from Enterprise Bank and alongside, if you will, Daryl's Music Hall. And we have no location where we can have receive deliveries of our liquid nitrogen or Cisco trucks. And presently there are 2 handicapped parking spaces alongside the building on the Water Street side. And we don't want to impinge on those. If we could have the forward one, which I guess would be furthest east, redesignated for us to use as a loading zone. There's a receiving door where we will bring our products in, right where the rear of that location is, sir, or that parking spot. Our concern is if we asked you to designate the one in spot, we might not be able to, or our delivery services might get boxed in by another vehicle and might not be able to provide delivery services. And that's why we asked for the one more forward on the hill, if you will, of Water Street.
Excuse me. Yes.
Yes, sir.
All right. That's it? All set, Mr. McCabe?
Yes, sir. I believe so. If there's any other questions, I'm happy to.
All right.
Another point of order, Mr. Chair. Did
Yes.
Mr. McCabe give his address?
Yes.
Peter, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. That's 83 Main. But the delivery access door is actually on the Water Street side. It's right on the corner of Main and Water.
Yeah, I know the address of the business. Typically, when someone makes public comment, we get their address for the record of them
Thank
themselves.
you. I appreciate the correction, sir.
And your home address is?
319 Mammoth Road, Pelham, New Hampshire. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you, Alderman Lopez. You're going to get elevated in my parliamentarian one of these days. You're going to do it.
I'm already your vice chair, man. I'm watching.
Yeah,
you're
you're
gonna miss a meeting.
doing a fine job. Thank you. I have the best vice chair and the clerk. Thank
I
you.
put the vice in vice chair.
All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. McCabe. Anybody else that has public comment? Seeing none. Communications,
There are none.
petitions,
There are none.
unfinished business,
None again.
new business ordinances.
We have ordinance 21-061, changing the location of the handicap parking space on Water Street. Mr. Chairman, I move for final recommendation.
Okay, the motion is for final passage. Any discussion on the motion? Alderman Lopez.
Alderman Jettie did point out that in reading the ordinance, he was not certain that it actually did what the McCabe's were looking for. So could maybe Director Cummings comment on that?
Yes, I did have a very brief discussion with Director Cummings. He is aware of that. But Director Cummings, would you like to answer that question?
Yes, happy to, and I'm going to need to double check what I'm about to say, but my belief is that what the thought process may have been is ordinance 21050 and/or ordinance 21051 as amended, what we will refer to as the so-called Jettie Amendment, allowed for the mayor to adjust the location and timeframes of the 15-minute parking and/or add or create additional parking as necessary. I think the thought process was is if they were to move the handicap parking spot back, then you'd be able to create the 15-minute parking on the two upper lots at the corner of what would be Water and Main Street. To essentially be able to provide what the business owner would be looking for, as well as to create some additional parking for the general public.
Director Cummings, I do have a question. Do you see any objections to put that down to pen and ink to paper by making an amendment to that to clearly specify, or do you think those other amendments, those other ordinances or resolutions cover it?
Well, what I would recommend is you proceed with this current piece of legislation to move the handicap spot. I think everyone recognizes that the handicap spot needs to be moved back. If for some reason the other adopted pieces of legislation, the now ordinances don't seem to cover or get what needs to be done, then we would file an additional piece of legislation to create the 15-minute parking.
Very good. Alderman Lopez.
I am somewhat flabbergasted that we somehow missed the fact that we gave the mayor the opportunity to permanently move parking spaces around, and I think we should probably address that. So this works for now because we have the barriers up, and it'll definitely get them opening on time and all that kind of stuff. But I was not under the impression that was any kind of a permanent change, and I thought that was what the owners were looking for here. So in the interest of alacrity, because I believe Sub-Zero is due to open like next month, and I want to encourage that, I agree with Director Cummings that we should move forward, but I am actually alarmed that there was that understanding that you could move, especially handicap spaces. I didn't think we could move those around at all. And I've had constituent concerns that we've reduced handicap parking, and I've basically been telling people that as far as I count, none of them are reduced, and we haven't done anything of the kind.
Well,
So I agree with.
If I could,
yeah.
Director Cummings.
Yeah, there's another story to that, so I'll recognize Director Cummings. Thank you.
so just to clarify a couple of things. One, the legislation I just cited that was passed, there is a sunset provision of November 15th. Two, no handicap spaces have been eliminated thus far, but what has happened, and Alderman Lopez is absolutely correct, we have moved some of those handicap spaces around. So they weren't in the traditionally common thought of handicap spaces. The legislation before you would permanently move the handicap spaces that are on Water Street back down a little bit further down the block.
Okay. And Director Cummings, for everybody's knowledge, to have back-to-back handicap spaces such as we have on Water Street is somewhat of an anomaly. We don't really see that much in this city at all. So by separating them may entice the public more and grant people of another area more handicap access, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Alderman Lopez.
To your point, Mr. Chair, it's actually pretty undesirable because they're on a hill. So people with wheelchairs have to get out and then roll up a hill. I would love to move those. I didn't realize that we were moving them though, because I've been telling constituents that they weren't being moved. I did a visual inspection of where the handicap spaces were, and I hadn't seen any blocked off, but I personally should never plan on visual anything. So like I said, this is news to me, but that's my oversight, no pun intended. But I think we should probably, at some point, and on this committee, just to make sure that we are in the loop on all of this, have a summary of changes that are made when they happen at these meetings. If Director Cummings is willing, just to say, for example, like this, we have a restaurant opening, we needed to move things around, we did this. We initiated this, but if it has to happen elsewhere, it would be good to be in the loop on that, just so that we can get ahead of any concerns.
Very good. Alderman Lopez, your point is very well taken. I like to make sure that we do take care of members of our community, our friends who are handicapped, that they do have parking spaces. But that in mind, Alderman Lopez, I'll charge you to take a look where it is your ward. And I think we could work with Director Cummings going forward with this. But I think to assist our friend here, Mr. McCabe, and to welcome him to the downtown, I think basically, I would look to support this as this is written right now. It will free up so that they will be able to receive their supplies for their business. So tonight we could go a little bit farther into solving a problem for them, and we can address the other issues at another meeting.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I'm speaking to my own activities so that the public knows that it was an oversight on my part. I had thought we hadn't moved any of these. So again, if Director Cummings gives us a heads up when he moves them, I'm not going to try to take responsibility for noticing that they moved, because I didn't even notice that this had happened. So I'd rather that we are on top of it and that we're working collaboratively. Again, fully in favor of this move particularly, and those particular handicap spots. Even the curb on that particular area is pretty steep. So it's probably, we can do better moving those handicap spaces to elsewhere anyway.
Okay. Any other members of the committee have any input? Alderman Jettie?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, as I was preparing for tonight's meeting and looking at the thread of emails that Mrs. McCabe had sent and responses to her, what the McCabes were looking for, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. McCabe, what they were looking for was to provide a loading zone in front of the side door to their building. There's a door on Water Street that provides access to their restaurant and also the Espresso Pizza. And what this proposed ordinance does, it doesn't provide for a loading zone. What it does is it moves the handicap parking space. I also learned that from looking at their emails, I see that the McCabe's looking at the at the ground. If you look at it, there are two handicap parking spots there with the little decal, the wheelchair symbol painted on the ground, on the asphalt, in two spots. The current ordinance does not provide for two handicap places. The current ordinance only provides for one.
Right.
So what is marked on the ground is inconsistent with our current ordinance. The current ordinance provides for a handicap spot between 217 feet from Mechanic and 237 feet from Mechanic Street. When you measure that, the two handicap parking spots that are currently painted on the ground are not within those measurements. That would provide for a handicap spot closer to Main Street than those two handicap spots are currently as painted on the ground. I spoke to Attorney Clark, who drafted this, and she said that Wayne Husband, the traffic engineer, had pointed that out to her as well. I think what this amendment to our ordinances does is it relocates the one handicap parking spot, not two, but the one closer. It relocates it closer to Mechanic Street and would provide for two metered spaces closer to Main Street. So when Director Cummings says that, he thinks because of the authority we granted the mayor, I think he said that it would provide, that they could provide for 15-minute parking spots. That is not a loading zone, and I don't know if Mr. McCabe or the McCabes understand, what we're doing and whether or not providing for 15-minute parking spots, which would be available to the public, whether that accomplishes his desire to have a loading zone. A loading zone is not, is not addressed in this proposed ordinance. The loading zones are in section 71. And they provide for no parking between 6 a.m. and 9 p.m. Except for people who are dropping off. I did notice that there is a loading zone provided for on the other side of Water Street, the north side of Water Street, along Darrell's music store. And I don't know if that loading zone would enable the McCabes to service, they'd have to, whoever's delivering something would be able to park in that loading zone on the north side of Water Street. And I don't know if, they'd have to cross the street,
I don't know about that, Alderman Jettie.
Excuse me, Alderman Lopez, Alderman Jettie has the floor.
So I don't know if that would accommodate them. I'm not saying, I'm just interested in, in hearing all of this, Mr. McCabe, what your reaction is to.
Alderman Jettie, that question has to go through the chair.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chairman, of course. If
Yeah, we'll allow Mr. McCabe to speak briefly, but right now this is a committee meeting, so the priority goes to members of the committee. So Alderman Lopez, did you have something you wanted to say?
Well, I do not want to intervene with what Mr. McCabe is going to say. I just would be extremely concerned about having anybody unloading anything and crossing the street repeatedly in that area. That intersection is not our best designed one. It's coming up from a hill. There's people coming around the corner with all like multiple different directions. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. And then anticipating what Mr. McCabe is likely to say, I think while he was describing a loading zone, he doesn't necessarily want to reduce the number of parking spaces that are adjacent to his restaurant. So he may use it as a loading zone, and it may be beneficial for it, for example, to be like a 90-minute parking or 50 or something like that, so that somebody doesn't park there all day. But I don't think he actually wanted to restrict all parking there, because that would potentially hurt the access to his business.
Yes, thank you, Alderman Lopez. And that's really to the heart of the particular matter. Unfortunately, it was left out of this current ordinance. It's seems to be included into something else. But what are the pros and the cons of a loading zone? Well, the pros is it would be a place that a truck could go, but just the truck only to unload materials. It's not meant for the owner of the facility to park their car. It's not meant for even the customers to park there. It is only for the brief loading and offloading. There's other multiple businesses that are there on that particular block. So with parking the way that it is, how can we remove this spot, make it back open again, yet keep it to be viable to both the Sub-Zero, Espresso Pizza and everything? It's why I think we should probably contemplate and looking at the 15-minute. That would mean that it would be available to a truck that comes in. The driver will be able to go and when the spot opens up, do his delivery, take off. Quick customer can go in, 15-minute limit. it would be constantly, circular for all to basically use it. So why I am kind of leaning to that. So at this particular time, generally we have the open discussion, but I will allow Mr. McCabe, are you still there?
Yes, sir, I am.
I'll let you speak onto this from what you have heard so far.
Yes, I appreciate it too. Mr. Alderman Lopez points out a very good point. Having handicap spots on a hill does no good for anybody that's handicapped. And because I'm a career military guy, I will offer this. If you go further west on Water Street on that same line of parking, the very last section has a fire hydrant that's blocked off. But that last spot would be better suited to be the handicap spot, because then anybody in a wheelchair could immediately roll around that fire hydrant and the telephone pole and come up on the curb and utilize the curb there. There is no ramp on that hill for anybody handicapped to access onto the sidewalk, sir. So I came with an alternative for you, because one of the points I heard was we don't want to minimize handicap parking, and Rita and I, this is one of those things that kind of were dear to our heart. We don't want to impact negatively on the handicap community by any means at all. We just thought we were requesting, because that forward one, the tail of a truck, delivery truck, would be basically right at our door. And if somebody was had encroached further out of the second one, then the driver could pull forward, just inch forward a little further to the east, and still be able to open up their rear doors. So I appreciate also the consideration of a 15-minute delivery time. I don't know if 15 minutes is enough, but I sense from hearing your discussion that 15 minutes is probably something that's in the laws or whatnot, in the writings. And I got to give it credit to the local police department. I don't believe for a minute they're unreasonable. If there's a delivery truck delivering, I don't think if they're there, 20 minutes to 30 minutes, I don't think they're going to negatively impact them. So I give credit to the leadership of the Nashua Police Department as well, and the traffic control. So we're not necessarily opposed to that either. I appreciate the consideration. And it's true, yes, Daryl's music shop across the corner does have a delivery area there, and for the very reason that Mr. Lopez pointed out, it is a real dangerous corner. Even when I use there's one metered parking spot there, I'm always aware of cars coming from across the street by the library and darting across, dodging cars that are coming off water, and the ones coming south off of Main onto water. It is a dangerous corner, but either way, I appreciate the consideration. My wife and I both appreciate the consideration of your board. And I'm sure in the end, and we quite frankly, we appreciate the support of you wanting to see us succeed down on Main Street. The greater Nashua, they've wanted us down there for a long time. We really have a wonderful product. We give back to the community a lot. So we try to engage as much as possible. So I appreciate all your consideration. Thank you.
You're on mute, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Thank you, Mr. McCabe, and I'm going to try awful hard not to let my love of ice cream influence my decision here. But Alderman Lopez, in just one second, but it seems, Mr. McCabe, you do have a graphs. When we come to the vote, it is within my hope that we'll change the handicap parking with the weather eye of looking in the future. You seem to be in agreement with the 15-minute, which will allow, and I think I could give you some assurances with Director Cummings that the people that we have working for the city, parking enforcement, if they do see a truck actively offloading, I think they will completely understand. If it's a 20-minute offload, I believe nobody from parking enforcement's got to be there with the stopwatch. So,
Oh, you went back on mute, sir.
there we go. It just did it all by itself. But I think it would satisfy your needs and also the needs of your customers and the tenants and everything. So thank you, Alderman Lopez, for patiently waiting.
Yeah, no problem. So I wanted to check in with Director Cummings regarding the 15-minute increments. While that is what is provided for in the jetty amendment, I think there's other products offered in terms of parking zones. And I also want to reiterate for Mr. McCabe that the police are good at a lot of things, but Director Cummings oversees the parking enforcement department. So talk to him. But Director Cummings, the length of time is 15 minutes ultimately if we choose to amend this into a more permanent form. Aren't there other categories?
If I may, Mr. Chair,
Yes, you may.
to Alderman Lopez's point, yes, there are other categories we could look at. I believe the best course of action right now is for us to look at this 15-minute scenario. Let's test that out. We're gonna have to make a permanent solution. And if we have the ability to look at this, watch it, see how it's working, and then, you know, file an additional piece of legislation, maybe for the early fall type time frame to make this permanent, or to at that point change it, we'll at least have some data to go off of. And I think that was the theory of the thought process behind this. What the legislation before you is a combination of work between the engineering department and the parking department here in the city. Because they looked at it, they went out on site a couple of times to see how best to address this issue, and they thought that the language before you was the best way to try to solve everyone's problem.
If I may ask one final question of Director Cummings.
Absolutely.
Regarding the riverfront planning, I believe it's 2 or 3 years down the road. Some of the plans say that we may or may not adjust the traffic flow over there. Some of them say that we don't, but there's nothing that's going to be happening in the immediate near future that will affect that particular intersection, right? Because for people who are not fully imagining the area, it's also where the Parc de Notre Renaissance Française comes out. That's actually an active road that is used by Clock Tower residents. And then on the other side, Mechanic Street also dumps onto it. So there's like an informal intersection just before the intersection.
If I may, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, excuse me, just for
Thank you.
one.
Yes.
I do see Alderman Tenza has joined us, so the clerk can make recommendations. No, thank you. Director Cummings, excuse me, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Alderman Lopez is correct. We will be thinking about or contemplating implementing a design change on Water Street a few years from now. Nothing imminent. And the current design does not call for any type of loss of parking onto Water Street. That's a commitment that we gave to the abutting businesses in and around the area, but will it be redesigned and laid out differently? Yes, there is that tendency. What they're looking at is head-in type parking, but that's probably a conversation for another day.
All right, further questions by members of the committee? Alderman Jettie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Director Cummings, the current proposed ordinance would locate the handicap spot, relocate the handicap spot to 155 feet from Mechanic Street to 175 feet. So it provides for a 20-foot parking spot. As I try to manipulate my measuring device here on the GIS, the city GIS thing, it looks like that would locate the parking spot. So as I'm looking at it, it looks like from the hydrant on Water Street there, going east from Mechanic, there's a there are driveways, and then there's a hydrant, and parking begins. This proposed location of the handicap would be the third spot up going east towards Main Street. What do you think of Mr. McCabe's suggestion that the handicap spot be actually the first spot in line, closest to the hydrant, which would allow, easier, drive-in access to someone handicapped, and it's a flatter area. Do you think that would make any sense rather than two up from there?
If,
If I
Mr.
could
Chairman,
ask
if I
the
may,
chairman.
Yeah, you may.
I'm having a hard time understanding where the hydrant is because I'm not seeing where you're referencing the hydrant, but are you essentially saying that moving the handicap parking spot to the most easterly point on Water Street, so it would be closest to Main Street? Is that what I'm
No.
hearing the suggestion is?
No, just the opposite. Moving it further west, so away from Main Street. So it would, so I don't know if you're looking at the GIS. I don't know how to
Yes, I am.
I don't know how to share my screen with you, but so are you looking at an aerial view?
Yes.
Could you? Yes, okay. So you see where Mechanic Street is. And as you go towards Main Street, which would be easterly, you can see there are two cars parked off the road in a private parking lot. So the hydrant is located right near there. And so the first car that you see there would be the spot that I'm talking about, closest to the hydrant. Mr. McCabe made the point about, and I think Alderman Lopez did as well, that for handicapped people, a flatter area is more beneficial to them for entering and exiting their vehicles. And so the spot that's closest to Mechanic Street, which is also closest to the hydrant, would be the flattest.
So I'm understanding what you're saying. So I just would want to double check to make sure that, is that area currently a legal parking space right now?
Yeah, not where the hydrant is, of course, there's no parking in front of the hydrant. But yeah, as I'm looking at the GIS map, so
Yeah.
you see the two
So you're,
cars, you see the two cars that are off-road, they're up
yes.
against a building there. So just to the
Yes.
left, so that car that's closest to the street, kind of a gray looking car, just to the left of that, there's
Yes.
a little yellow thing. That's the hydrant there. And so, so parking, whatever the legal, whatever the restriction is from the distance you have to stay away from a hydrant, wherever that is, that's where the legal parking begins. I think there's a car spot parked there, the gray car right there.
So it's essentially where the gray car is, you're suggesting.
I think so. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Whatever the legal spot is closest to the hydrant, make that the handicap spot. So that for the reasons that Alderman Lopez and Mr. McCabe mentioned, and then the rest of it could be the regular meters, or the places closest to Main Street would be the 15-minute.
Yeah, understood. I understand what you're saying. And I mean, I would want to double check with the engineering department here in the city. We have the parking department on as well. So I just want to take a moment and make sure we recognize Jill Stansfield, the city's parking manager. Subject to them being okay with that change, I'm not foreseeing any issues and as to why there would be a problem. I don't foresee any problems with that as what has been suggested.
Right, and correct me, Director Cummings, we could change that as we move along anyways. Correct?
I mean, we can,
Yeah.
I can look into that if that's the pleasure of the body.
I
We can
think
absolutely
right
have.
now, the issue at hand is we have a business that wants to open on, they need an area designated so that they can receive their goods. And so therefore, I think we need to take care of that. I think we could adjust the parking, handicap, additional space as we move farther down
So-
the road. Okay.
So to that point, Mr. Chair, what I would suggest then is we move forward with the current legislation as is. As we're studying the 15-minute parking spaces a little bit to the east of that area, we will, when we bring in the final product piece of legislation, if it's satisfactory to the parking and engineering departments, we will then finally shift the handicap spot further to the area that Alderman Jetty's suggesting.
Very good. All right. Very good. I think we got it. Something that we all can vote on, unless somebody has something different. Therefore, let the clerk please call the roll.
Alderman O'Brien,
Yes.
Alderman Lopez,
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt says yes, Alderman Jettie,
Yes.
and Alderman Tenza.
Yes.
5 yeas, no nays.
Okay, motion carried, and good luck to the McCabe clan on the opening of their new business on the Main Street. I'm sure everybody would love to get a Sub-Zero ice cream, so
We're
Okay.
super excited. We're super excited. Thank you so very much,
looking
everyone.
forward to meeting you in person.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
Sounds really cool.
My honor. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. You too, sir.
Good night.
Good night. All right, new business resolutions.
We have Resolution 21-135, authorizing a first amendment to purchase and sale agreement for real property located at 141 and 143 Burke Street, map 11, lot 158. Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend final passage.
Okay, I'm going to recognize at this time Director Cummings. Can you give us some, present this to the board, please?
Yes, I'd be happy to, Mr. Chair. So for the record, Tim Cummings, Director of Economic Development, and I am, if I may, bringing up my my screen. I'm
You
going
are
to
all
just
set.
show you.
Yeah, I spoke to Jeff. You
Thank-
should be all set.
Thank you. So essentially what you're going to see now is my screen that shows the majority of what the amendment before you speaks to, which is really creating an easement area that's both beneficial to the future owner of the Burke Street warehouse building, and then the city of Nashua, who's retaining, as you know, some of the original land and for the expansion of the wastewater treatment plant. So what the current amendment speaks to is, you have my screen up, you'll see this dashed line here. This dashed line represents an existing ancient easement that is a cross-access easement that really ends right in through here and terminates basically in what is right now kind of a greenfield type area, and doesn't really connect into small Sawmill Road. And that has been something that everyone has wanted to address. And then in addition to that, you have this warehouse, which the prospective buyer has represented that due to how we've laid out this site, they are having some issues with making some turning movements for larger type trucks as they look to, and as you can see my cursor, what they're looking to do is to back into the warehouse in a swinging motion like this. And this is going to become problematic for them because they don't have the radius necessary to be able to make that swing. And so what they've asked for is an ability to essentially encroach in this area of ours, which is the city's new land that we subdivided this, about 2.5 acres, which this is the property line. So what was developed was what I think a really cool and innovative solution where we are basically this easement, this ancient easement, you get reconnected back into it in the top up here, but you basically create a truck route in through here, but that will also double as a route for other people to have the cross access easement, particularly our wastewater treatment plant, to be able to access through here and be able to go up along through the park. And then they're going to additionally create a municipal parking field for us, which was the original idea of the 2.5 acres, was to be able to create parking spaces for us up in this area here, which would free up some parking spaces to the south that will allow for an expansion to occur for the wastewater treatment plant. So this is all what has been developed over the last few months as we've been working through the final due diligence stages to hopefully have this property sold, and we have a tentative closing date set for the end of May. So I'm asking for your approval this evening on this amendment. It's a win-win solution for everyone, and it really helps us move one step forward to disposing this property and ultimately moving forward with the overall citywide goals that we have. I'll stop sharing my screen right now. I just wanted to visually show you what it is that's being contemplated this evening.
Alderman Lopez.
I like the cut through for city services. I mean, not only for the general sense of like cooperative neighborhoodness, but the energy efficiency. It saves a little bit of, it's a little bit fuel efficient. Our natural gas trucks, I believe, our trucks are powered by natural gas, contributed by Alderman O'Brien's generation, I think. So I see this as a win-win for everybody.
You're gonna miss us, boomers.
Thank you for the landfills.
Alderman Jettie.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chairman, if I could ask Director Cummings,
Absolutely. Thank you, Alderman.
the proposed parking, who is that going to be for? Who do you anticipate is going to be parking there?
That would be for the future expansion of the water treatment plant, exclusively for that use, not for the use of the Burke Street warehouse that we're selling.
So you anticipate employees of the wastewater treatment plant parking there?
I mean, there may be, I mean, I don't know how many visitors that area, that site gets. I mean, there may be some ancillary visitor type parking as well, but really, truly, it's to move the parking field and the parking that accommodates the wastewater treatment plant employees up a little bit further north, so you can expand in and around the wastewater treatment plant right now.
Okay, and if I could ask another question, Mr. Chairman?
Absolute follow-up.
So the on your when you shared your screen, you showed that the city would be conveying an easement to the purchaser of the property, and the purchaser in turn would be granting the city an easement over part of its property. So the resulting, I think it was in red dashed lines. Is that going to be a street? Is that going to be available to the public? Would anybody be able to drive through there?
I do not believe it's going to be public. It is an easement. It's a cross-access easement essentially that was created back when this area was redeveloped with many different owners, as I understand it. I don't know if it was one parcel at one time, but it's been subdivided over the years, and there's an association in place here. And so it's, the members of the association, as I understand it, have the rights to cross the easement, in which, the wastewater treatment plant, i.e. the city of Nashua, has that ability.
Okay, so you anticipate the city having the use of that, but not the public. It wouldn't be a public street. It wouldn't be accessed by the public. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Alderman Dowd.
Yes, just a couple of things. One, when we write the easement, if by some reason we ever needed that land for the wastewater treatment plant, is there any, is this in last forever, or are there escape routes if we needed to move that easement? Oh, question through you, Mr. Chair, to Tim Cummings.
Yes. Director Cummings?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I've learned, nothing is forever in real estate. But I do want to be clear, there's no sunset provision. There's no termination date. This is an easement. It's not a license agreement. And I'm saying all that to make it clear that, it is not going to be an easy effort to change it in the future, which is one of the reasons why we really took our time to map out what the municipal parking field would look like so we could accommodate our goals, because we know that was really important to do as we were thinking about, the future planning of this area. And we're thinking not just 5-10 years down the road, but 50 years down the road. So we think we've preserved the city's interests as much as possible.
Yeah, follow-up question.
Yes, you may.
Yeah, through you to Director Cummings again, that easement, which I assume would be paved, seems to run right through that little building. My question is, A, does that building still exist? B, has anyone ever opened that building to see what was inside? Because when we were originally looking at Burke Street, nobody knew what was in there. And C, if it's going to be torn down for this right of way, who's bearing the cost of tearing it down?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may, all excellent questions. It will be torn down. The cost of that will be on the prospective purchaser. It will essentially, once it's torn down, become an area that will be maintained as an access way, as a driveway, for lack of a better description.
And one additional follow-up question, which I didn't hear answer, was, do we know what's inside that building? And if it's contaminated material, who's responsible for getting rid of it?
Again, it's the prospective purchaser who's going to be demoing that building, and the prospective purchaser will be opening it up.
Okay.
Alderman Jettie.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to point out to Alderman Dowd's question, the easement that we're granting. I'm looking at the language. City hereby grants to 141 property owner a permanent, perpetual, irrevocable, non-exclusive easement for purposes of pedestrian and vehicular ingress and egress in right of passage. So I'm not the city's attorney, but I would say that means that the purchaser is going to have an easement over that property for pedestrian and vehicular ingress and egress in perpetuity. Thank you.
Okay. Further comments? Members of the board? I would just say, Director Cummings, my history on the fire department, I remember that property was Ingersoll, Rand, and IMCO. They used to build air compressors, paper making, milling products. It did a lot of stuff, over the years. And Alderman Dowd, yes, I have been in that building, but we'll keep what's in there a mystery, so. But I used to work out of the Crown Hill Station, been in all over that property. Seeing no other further questions, will the clerk please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alderman O'Brien,
Yes.
Alderman Lopez, he's coming.
My mouse keeps getting stuck, sorry. Yes.
Alderman Schmidt says yes, Alderman Jettie,
Yes.
and Alderman Tensa.
Yes.
5 yeas and no yays.
Motion carries. There's been no announcement of anything to take anything at this particular time off the table. And I was approached by Director Cummings that he does have some additional information that he would like to present to members of the board and to the public. So at this time, I will recognize Director Cummings if you want to give us updates on some of the goings-ons, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I asked for just a few minutes of the body's time here this evening to have a informal roundtable type conversation. One, to fill you in on the various developments that happened in the downtown area, and then also just to briefly talk with the group about some of the development that's in the pipeline. So first and foremost, we're still moving forward with the School Street project. I have actually a meeting with the prospective purchaser of that property, the developer, on Friday. He's working towards getting his financing, and as I understand it, there's no issues there, and he's looking to move forward with that project, which we're looking forward to. What has been referred to as the Indian Head Bank building at the corner of Temple and Main Street. An abandoned 100% unoccupied building as of right now, looks to be converted into about 17 apartments, and that's being done by Brady Sullivan. So we're interested in looking forward to see that development occur. We have the transit center here in Nashua that is run by the city through Director Marchant, looking to be reconstructed. And that's a smaller construction project, but nonetheless, they're looking to reconstruct the transit center sometime this summer. They're going to be looking to hopefully get underway by late summer, an August-ish type time frame. Performing Arts Center. I'll give a more formal a status update on this to the body. In writing, but just so everyone knows, since I'm doing just a quick update on various things in terms of development in the downtown, that demolition has been completed in the front part of the building, the former Alex Shoe showroom area. The more historic building, the taller vertical building in the rear of the site that faces West Pearl Street, has been demoed as well. Steel construction and foundation work will be starting next week. We will be realigning the construction safety area and the barriers once the demolition is 100% wrapped up, which should be, which should be completed this week sometime. Project is on time, is on schedule, and on budget. As I continue moving down Main Street, the barriers are working out. They have been adjusted very minimally since what we did last year. We are trying to accommodate for bike lanes this year, as some of you may or may not have seen. But so far, it has been working out well. I think outdoor dining will really kick into high gear sometime around now. And I will be looking to have a conversation with the Board of Aldermen, but specifically the Infrastructure Committee. I'm thinking sometime in June type timeframe as to if we want to have this, type of layout for Main Street for future years. I've heard conversations and people have suggested that this is something that they may be interested in. I think that it would behoove us to have that conversation before we start our full parking study, because I would like to give our consultant, Desmond, clear direction before we start the parking study, which we are tentatively looking to start sometime in an August type time frame. And that's something that we were going to do prior to COVID. And in consultation with our consultant, they've recommended that they start sometime, again, late summer, early fall, call it an August type time frame. We have completed the overnight parking study that we conducted some community outreach on. I'm going to be looking to have a meeting with at least this body and maybe the full Board of Aldermen, whatever the pleasure of this group is, on the results of the overnight parking study, ideally sometime in the end of May. So maybe it's an agenda item for discussion, either for the Committee on Infrastructure or special Board of Aldermen meeting. But what I would like to do is have the consultant who did the report, Andy Hill, who I believe all of you have met, come in and give a formal presentation on the report that has been completed now. And so I think just to kind of continue along with the timeline, that would be something that I would be looking for maybe at your next Infrastructure Committee meeting. And then finally, as I want to round out my comments here, and again, I just wanted to kind of give everyone a very high level brief overview on the varying aspects within the downtown. I'm getting approached more and more by private sector developers about the idea of providing some sort of tax incentive or some sort of tax abatement or tax relief on projects that are underway or being thought of to be going underway. And so I have been resistant to move forward in the direction of providing any type of tax relief. The city of Nashua has only done it once in the program that most people think of, which is referred to as RSA 79E. That was for the Cotton Mill Square project done by local developer John Stabile. It's an affordable housing project of about 100 units where he took an abandoned 100% vacant factory building and converted it into affordable housing units and market rate units along the riverfront. So we have a couple buildings in the downtown that are nothing like that in terms of size, scale, scope, or magnitude. And there are some folks who are suggesting that, the city should be providing a tax abatement for these folks if they were to develop the project, or if they've already developed it as a thank you for them for doing the work, or for taking that project on. I have counseled a lot of these people that that's not an appropriate usage of the program. It doesn't meet the spirit, I believe, where you need to have what is referred to as substantial rehabilitation. And I often point to the Cotton Mill Square project as an example. And that what you're doing is just using empty space that you're not getting any rent on, and you're actually, rightly so, trying to get as much money as you can, which, converting it into usable space where you can get rent. And there's nothing wrong with that, but the city shouldn't necessarily be looking to give up tax revenue, future tax revenue, because you've decided to take on that type of private enterprise. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure the group was aware of some of this, and had a quick briefing on some of these items. And then I guess finally the riverfront, we are moving forward with the riverfront design. I believe I was before this body a month or two or so ago, giving a high level update. We have finished the preliminary design. So I'd be looking to come before you with the engineering team to give a more formal presentation of the preliminary design, much bigger detail or in much more depth than what I had done about 6-8 weeks ago now. And again, that would be something I would be looking to do in a June type time frame. So anyway, thank you, Mr. Chairman, for giving me the opportunity to just provide everyone a high level overview of various things that are happening in the downtown.
Thank you, Director Cummings. We do have a couple of questions from members of the board. Will you be willing to take them?
Yes.
Not you, Alderman Lopez.
You didn't say anybody.
Yeah.
I don't know who you're looking at.
Thank you, Director Cummings. First on
Thank
the
you.
list, we have a caller from Dave Tenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Cummings, can you, on this idea of providing incentives, tax abatements for projects, how much are those developers willing to sort of show us their books or finances into the project to show that the project is not viable without those incentives? Is that part of their part of their offer, or are they just looking for the city to give them abatements when we can't really verify that they're needed to make the project economically viable?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, that's a great question. So it really depends on the development group and the developer. I can't speak for everyone, but I can tell you in a couple of circumstances, I've had a couple of the developers actually say no, they weren't going to be providing any type of financial background for me to evaluate, to your point, which makes it very difficult because, as I point out, they are essentially asking us to become a financial partner with them, and we should really be able to get a better understanding of the financial situation. And so, again, to answer your question, some of the groups do not and refuse to provide that type of detail. And then, in fairness, a couple of the developers I've spoken to have freely admitted that there isn't a gap or a problem making the project pencil. They actually have admitted they're getting a good, reasonable return of somewhere between 15 and 18% on their investment, and they just are looking to get a little bit more. And so I've pointed out to them that a 15% IRR is very reasonable for the market. And if they get a little bit more at 18%, they're doing well. But I could not in good faith recommend a tax incentive on someone who's already getting a 15 or 18% return. But nonetheless, they have represented that to me. But that still does not dissuade them from doing their job, rightfully so, of asking for more. Does that answer your question, Alderman Tenza?
It does. Thank you.
Okay, next in the queue is Alderman Dowd.
Yes. I had heard possibility of considering, not that we're thinking one way or the other on it, of tax incentives for people to build affordable housing for younger people. And that was because it's very difficult to make a profit building apartments or condos for that younger people, first-time buyers can afford. But that hasn't really gone anywhere. My personal opinion is on projects that are completed or are already started, too late. This is not, this is, if they went into the project thinking they were doing okay or did okay, we are not in a position to be giving tax abatements for that. We need all the tax money we can get. So based on how the state is pushing everything down to us. So that would be my opinion.
Thank you, Alderman Dowd.
All right, next is Alderman Lopez. You're muted, Alderman Lopez.
Tax abatement to get a new mouse. So I have two different topics that were covered in the overview and then a question for the end. So I'm just going to try to stick with what everybody else has been talking about, and hopefully the chair will circle back to me when it's more appropriate. But with regards to tax abatement or grants or other types of incentives for development, I'm thinking of specifically, for example, 243 Main Street. Whole bunch of empty storefronts in dire need of surface level redevelopment. It represents literally a blight on that area and that neighborhood. And as far as the city's gateway to economic activity is, I don't just mean like last year where their front end of their building fell off. I mean, there's literally been nothing in those end storefronts for quite a while. And the insides are really need a lot of renovating. That's one area where the city would benefit from having abandoned or very much underused properties on the street level expanded on. And then it's no news to anybody, but there is a downtown housing capacity shortage. Housing located downtown is walkable to buses, to hospitals, it's to resources of people with mobility issues that might need elderly people who are disabled, that kind of stuff. Same desirability that younger people have who want to live in walking distance of things might represent a necessity. There is some housing stock available, for example, above Fody's restaurant and above, possibly above Martha's on the third floor. Both of those two examples are historic buildings that their full utilization is a benefit. Are we looking at any kind of targeted, how do we encourage these developers to do things, and do we have any tools for them to walk through to see how other people are doing things?
Yes, if I may, Mr. Chair. Thank you. There are some tools available. I would try to stay away from tax incentive, tax abatement type conversation as much as possible. But there are federal level tax credits for the two particular sites that you mentioned, with the historic tax credits where eligible costs can get up to a 20% reimbursement. That might be something that an owner would look at. And again, that's a federal program. At the local level, we're in the early stages of developing a housing trust fund. So if maybe one of these groups were to provide affordable housing, and they were willing to make that unit available, we could, in theory, use some housing trust fund to help with the conversion. There's a lot that goes into that. You don't want to over subsidize a unit, so you really need to be diligent in whether if we went down that path. My office does run a revolving loan fund, which could be used for low interest type loans. The city does receive CDBG funds for home funds, which are typically used for affordable housing projects. So to answer your question, Alderman Lopez, there are various tools available. I actually am working with a group of MIT students right now, some graduate students, under the stewardship of Professor Jeff Levine, who is a planning consultant out of Portland, Maine, who's again a professor at MIT's School of Urban Planning, actually to speak to this very issue, where we're looking at how can we develop a public policy. And we're not exactly sure which public policy that may be or what that strategy is, but what we can do to help convert some of the empty, underutilized space on the second and third floor of buildings on Main Street into residential housing. And so we're still a little early in that project, but when the time comes, I'd love to bring it before you all and share the work that was done by some of these MIT students. And they are going to be looking at some best practices across the country, and they may be able to bring something to us that would be innovative and something for us to potentially pursue. So I think it's a conversation that we should be continuing.
Mr. Chair, I can knock off another question if I can continue.
Okay, I got Alderman Jettie in the queue, but
I know, I just want to like keep it
okay,
clean and
because I was
organized.
gonna circle back, but go ahead, go ahead.
I appreciate it. So with regards to the Simon Street construction that was in the news recently, that's a much larger project. That's where they may be able to pitch a better case for a housing fund than say a smaller development, but they may also need more money. So where you have pluses or minus decision making, would it be possible with those students to perhaps consider making like a wizard of some type that you could click on the city's economic development site as a tool to say which is good, which is bad, which is better, which is worse?
Yeah, we can look into that. Yeah. I don't know if they have the skill set to do a wizard per se, but yeah, we might be able to put something together.
I programmed an app. If I can do it, anyone can.
We're all proud of you, Alderman Lopez. Very good. Alderman Jettie, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Cummings, you mentioned in your overview, you mentioned the barriers, and when we authorized the placement of the barriers this year, we gave the mayor, and we know that really meant you, the ability to make adjustments. And I'm wondering, I know I've heard, I know that you did make some adjustments down at the Water Street, Park Street, Main Street intersection, which I know some of the people in that area were very appreciative of. I've also been contacted by and I don't know if I'm assuming Alderman Lopez has as well, but businesses, retail businesses in the block between Factory Street and Water Street on the west side of Main Street, that for example, Wingate's Pharmacy, Cardin's Jewelers,
Avard's.
Havard's, there's a number of them there, the barber shop, saying that, basically saying, well, last year we understood the restaurants were really in difficult straits, and we wanted to support them. And so we, went along with the barriers, but in effect, those barriers have, cut us off. I'm speaking of, I'm quoting them, saying that they've cut off our customers, from being able to, like the pharmacy, people stopping in front of the pharmacy, going in and getting their prescription. And the fellow at Wingate's, Gary Wingate, said that he had spoken to several of his neighbors who kind of felt the same way. And in fact, one of the restaurants, San Francisco Kitchen, said there's a new owner. I didn't know there's a new owner there, but she said that she had more space than she really needed and be willing to give up some of that space. Have those people approached you? Is there anything you can do to provide the retail establishments with more accessibility on the Main Street? Through you, Mr. Chairman, of course.
Yes.
Thank you, and Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes, you may.
So the points are very, very good points that are being made right now and are not new. These are all the same points that we've heard now for quite a while. Ultimately, it's going to be, your decision as to whether you want to continue moving forward with the Main Street laid out differently. I do think there was a time last year in particular where the thought process was we need to help the restaurants and help, Main Street in general by that point by, allowing for more outdoor dining and more space for people to be on the sidewalk or outside, and not necessarily indoors. From there, it seems to be the conversation has evolved in some areas and maybe not everywhere, that we should be continuing this, putting aside the outdoor dining concept and just moving forward with a narrower Main Street, because it creates a more viable and vibrant, dynamic environment. And I don't know if everyone has come to that conclusion yet, but as COVID starts to pass and wane and we get back to somewhat normalcy, whatever that may be, we're going to need to have that type of conversation. And it's ultimately, the values that we hold as a community. I would suggest from a merchant's perspective, and particularly that block, and we've made this suggestion and we've offered differing strategies to help, but there's a Water Street surface parking lot right in the rear of all those buildings that they would have the best direct access to a parking lot. And so when I hear comments about, well, should they get parking right on Main Street again? I guess I would throw it back and say, well, what are they doing to try to enhance their parking on Water Street? And what about the Surface Street parking lot that's right there behind all of their storefronts? Let's utilize that. And that, I think, would be a more appropriate place of trying to get parking, increasing supply, improving the type of parking, whatever that may be, than just to go with the easier or more convenient solution of trying to provide the parking spaces on Main Street. I think everyone, understandably so, would say that you want to have parking right in front of you. As a good New Englander, I understand that. But I think that block in particular is blessed to have parking right in front of them. It's just not out their front door, it's out their back door. And so they just, need to maybe think of it a little bit differently. And maybe we have an obligation of helping them think of it a little differently. But that's very specific to that block. I think in general, we really need to have the conversation about what type of Main Street we want to have, whether we want a more pedestrian friendly Main Street. And if so, there's going to be those types of trade-offs. And I think it's a conversation that I welcome and is one to be had, and hopefully we'll have it sometime over the next few weeks. I defer to others and when they would like to have it, but I would like to have it sometime before we start the parking study, because the worst thing I could do is misspend city money having the parking consultant study something that ultimately that is not implemented. And so I'm going to need a clear charge as to what folks want to do before I feel comfortable cutting the parking consultant loose.
Okay, and Mr. Chairman, if I could follow up.
Sure, absolutely.
So the other thing you talked about was and you just mentioned it again, the future of Main Street, and whether or not we want to develop a more pedestrian friendly Main Street. And I don't know what answer I would give to that without considering what the alternatives would be. But it's occurred to me that it's not just do we go back to the Main Street we had with which I think had like 7 lanes, and provide a thoroughfare. How do you get from one end from the south end of Main Street to the north end as fast as possible? I know I don't think I want that, but the alternative right now is, a 2-lane Main Street with, barriers, uh, pretty much eliminating on-street parking. Another alternative would be to, narrow, instead of having 7 lanes, maybe have, 4 or 5 lanes, two travel lanes and, 1 lane each in each direction and a middle lane for turning, and then parking lanes on either side of that. And instead of barriers, extend, I know this is a lot more expensive than what we would be doing right away, but, eventually extending the Main Street sidewalks out. So instead of eliminating, the parking lane and a travel lane, we would just eliminate a parking lane and extend the sidewalk out there to provide, more pedestrian access and possibly restaurant seating. I think in the future, hopefully after COVID passes, the restaurants won't be so dependent upon outdoor dining. So I can envision a Main Street that would be, narrower as far as travel lanes, just the north and the south lane, but parking on either side so that the retail establishments, other than the restaurants, would be able to provide access to their customers. So I don't think it's it's a one way or the other. I think there are some variations that we could explore. And I'm,
May I, Mr. Chair?
Sure, absolutely.
I think you're right on, Alderman Jettie. I think there could be a hybrid approach. I think that's all going to need to be studied. I think we have some limitations right now, just based on the temporary nature of what we're doing. And so if we were to move more towards a more semi-permanent type solution, we might be able to, study it and do some things right now that we're not able to address, like left-hand turn lanes. So we have some left-hand turn lanes in some places that we have to keep right now. But if, to your point, if we were to maybe look at laying it out 100% completely different in a more of a semi-permanent type scenario, we might be able to address some of that. As well as there's going to be the big question of, do we want to take on this cost? And I think it's a fair point that we really need to kind of, ask ourselves, how long can we continue to roll out these barriers, this temporary measure, and not move more towards a semi-permanent and then ultimately to a more permanent type of solution. And there is a conversation to be had with the community on that. I think it's one that we should have, because the one thing I don't want to keep doing, and I've had some long conversations with the engineering department about this, is we don't want to keep redesigning and relaying out Main Street every year. We can't keep doing that. We have to agree on a layout that works, and we're going to have to leave it, hopefully in some way, for a period of time, because the redesigning of Main Street on a yearly basis, I don't think is a good policy that we should be pursuing in the long run. So I really think we should be looking at what I suggest is this is a temporary measure, and then we'll move more towards a semi-permanent type measure, and a more permanent type measure if folks want to change things again, moving forward. And maybe you assign a certain amount of cost to each one of those projects to kind of slowly move it forward, so it's not one big cost all at once. But these are all ideas that we really need to have some plan for.
Alderman Lopez.
Just some comments on what was said, and then my final topic, I guess. So the barriers and the makeup of Main Street in the past, it has been an error to try to do the entire Main Street at the same time. The sidewalks looked great at the end, but we almost murdered most of the existing restaurants when we did that. So we would want to be conscious of exactly how ambitious we are at looking at change. We could blow the problem up so large that we cannot find a solution. Additionally, there's timing to consider. It's a difficult prospect to sell to the taxpayers right now that we need to pay more consultants while we're laying off numerous city staff members and taxes are still going up. So we're all about to go through the budget process here. So that's going to be difficult, and we are not going to do Main Street businesses any favor by pitting them against the rest of the city with regards to their needs. If we make moves that impact those businesses, like we encourage Wingates to reconsider its space, we also have to consider how we made them do that. Because if we have them reconsider their space, and for example, the back door doesn't have the width that you need for a wheelchair access, it doesn't have a ramp or accessibility, it's not exactly the same scenario. So there are some areas where we will need that supply of tools that we were talking about earlier, in order to help businesses figure out how to make another scenario work as we adapt for it. Because I think that's really what we see when we hear businesses talking about how they don't like the current plan. It's more that they don't have a bridge from where they were to where they want to be, so that the current plan works for them as well. Those are all things I'm sure Director Cummings knows. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention, since we're talking about bridges, that Joanne still needs their ramp. So anytime that would be helpful. Joanne's Kitchens is looking for a handicap accessibility ramp. With regards to the barriers, Alderman Jetty's right. I've received a lot of constituent feedback regarding them. There were some orphan barriers, I guess, that I've been working with Director Cummings with. There's a couple of them in front of Joanne's Kitchen that Positive Street Art still plans to finish. I talked to Manny about those last week. But for the most part, the new barriers that went in front of Joanne's Surf and Main Street Euro were the new ones that we all saw in the Infrastructure Committee. So they don't really need to be painted. They look like a stone wall. So I think that is a relief to those businesses that have been waiting pretty patiently for all of these weeks while we drove over the ashes of Alex Shoe Store. There are also barriers on Water Street. Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm confusing myself. On Factory Street, that Alderman Jetty and I were working on with support from the mayor and Tim Cummings. And so Alderman Jetty and I are also on the board of a nonprofit, Operation Enduring Welcome, because those barriers are in direct proximity to the veterans home. They are not painted yet because we're trying to do something special for veterans, like do a American flag, stars and stripes kind of a theme for them in exchange for Memorial Day. So we do have our donations. We have a bunch of Boys and Girls Club volunteers and an artist that are going to be getting ready to do that. So I know people are kind of wondering, like, how come some of them never got painted? And it was more like we were figuring out the right way to do it. So hopefully I represented everything I was trying to say accurately. If Director Cummings wants to correct anything, feel free.
No, I think you did a great job, Alderman Lopez. Thank you.
Okay. I think everybody's had their opportunity, I hope. Okay. Thank you, Director Cummings, for the update. As always, you are welcomed to my committee. I know it's one of your favorite, you know, it is mine. No, but you're always welcome to come before the committee and do this. I think it's very imperative to get the information out to the public, and I appreciate you doing so. So thank you for coming. All right, at this time, speaking of the public, I'll open it up for public comment. Okay, seeing nobody's still here with us. Remarks by Alderman Dowd.
Yeah, I just, I've heard from some of the members of the Budget Committee, but I hadn't heard from Alderman Jetty. Has he reviewed the budget schedule and is okay with that?
If I may answer, Mr. Chairman.
You may answer.
You may make a comment.
Um, I have the schedule. I have not had a chance to review it. I don't anticipate any problems, but I'll let you know as soon as, I'll let you know by tomorrow.
Okay, that's good.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, like I said last night, looking forward to the budget process, working with you again, Alderman Dowd.
Mm-hmm.
Your clerk, very good. Let me see. Any other comments by Alderman? Alderman Lopez.
With regards to some of the things I commented on tonight, there is a mural renovation, I guess, underway in French Park, basically across Water Street from where Sub-Zero will be opening. And that is sponsored by the Richelieu Club and Involved to Impact. So if anybody's interested in looking for more information on that, it's on www.involvedtoimpact.org. It's the name of the title is in French, so I can't remember it off the top of my head. I think it is Paix de Fraternity, so peace and friendship, or peace and fraternity. And it features some historic French Franco-Nashوans throughout history that have contributed to things like Georgie Hippoff, Eric Drouart, the president of the Richelieu Club, and actually former Mayor Donnelly Lozo. So if people want to see a little more about what's going on with that, the project description and information is on that page. There's also an upcoming series of murals right around the corner from that that are supposed to be veteran-centric and supporting the veterans staying over at Delena's house. That'll be on the same site. And then the most recent project that I was mentioning is with Alderman Jetty. We'll put updates on there just because Operation Enduring Welcome is partnered with Involved to Impact. So we it's an easy way to put it up. While you guys are there, check out the Tree Streets Block Party because we're planning it for June 26th. We're looking for sponsors. We're looking for vendors. It's going to be socially distanced because that's the way Ash Street is anyway. It's like a long street. We're going to be having a futsal tournament where the participating youth will be wearing masks, and then their family and friends will be encouraged to. The event, we're encouraging anybody to wear masks so that you don't, if you're sick and you have the flu or anything like that, you're not spreading it, not just COVID-19, but just because we're going to be in a crowd and people are still getting used to coming back out. And we have a lot of good partners on board so far, like NeighborWorks and the Health Department, Southern Hampshire Services, a couple bands. So I definitely encourage everybody to check that out because I know we're all a little hesitant to jump the gun. We're watching what's going on in India with outbreaks. There's new variants coming out. And the rest of the world is still struggling with this. They don't have the same Operation Warp Speed that we had, but we do also need to have opportunities for fellowship and neighborly activity and that kind of stuff. So we're trying to figure out how to navigate that balance.
Could you, Alderman Lopez, could you repeat the date and the times again of that?
Yep, it's going to be June 26th. It's on Ash Street between Central and West Hollis. And the street will be closed from 12 to 4. The actual event is going to be 2 to 6 because as the event starts to wind down, we usually move the activities over into the side things like Los Amigos Park, the futsal court, the PAL Center's front yards, and then that opens up the street for people to start unloading their whatever they set up during the day as vendors.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Alderman Jetty.
Yeah, forgive me, Mr. Chairman, but I must correct Alderman Lopez. It's not the French Park. It's Le Parc de Notre Renaissance Française. If he needs to shorten it and call it Renaissance Park, but not French Park. And the sponsors of the painting of the the barriers that he mentioned, I should mention them.
Mhm.
It's Welts, White and Fontaine, where Alderman Tenza works. Smith, Weiss, Shepherd and Sponey, another law firm. And a new restaurant, which hasn't opened yet, but we're anticipating a September opening called Rambling House. Those are the businesses that have contributed to provide the materials for this, the painting of the barriers on Factory Street. And thank you, Alderman Lopez.
Yeah, and I appreciate both corrections. The Richelieu Club is always on me to try to make sure I get the name of that, but it's hard because everybody knows it by French Park. But as a feature of the mural, right in the middle, we're putting the name of the park in giant letters so that people can practice saying it.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thank you. At this time, I'm gonna pass out some committee homework if everybody's agreeable. And that's gonna be you, Alderman Jettie. Can you, follow up with your suggestions on that handicap parking, please? With, Director Cummings and follow it through engineering and, parking enforcement, Ms. Jill Stanfield. Can you handle that for the committee, please?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's worthwhile, and I'll let you, and whatever comes out, you can give me, we could bring it back, but I think everybody's in agreement with your idea, so I think we're looking pretty good there. So without any further comment, I welcome again, good job tonight. We welcome Sub-Zero for all ice cream lovers out there, so it's good to see a new business to come downtown. We're doing something right. So I think that's very good. Seeing no need for non-public session. I'm going to look to my clerk right now for a
Well,
motion.
I would make a motion to adjourn by roll call, Mr. Chairman.
We have a motion before us by Alderman Schmidt to adjourn by roll call. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman O'Brien,
Yes.
Alderman Lopez,
Yes.
Alderman Schmidt says yes, Alderman Jettie,
Yes.
and Alderman Tenza.
Yes.
5 yeas, 0 nays.
Okay, motion carries. And I'd like to thank again Director Cummings for joining us. Very informative, and wish you all a good night. Good job, everybody. And declare the meeting ended at 8:43.
Night.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good night.